My entire wargaming life, I have been battling with Warhammer 40k, just trying to beat it into submission to become the game that I've always wanted it to be. And today, we're going on the final step of that pretty long journey, because I have finally found a way to play Warhammer 40k that scratches every hobby itch imaginable.
Today we're going on an all-encompassing hobby journey, from making scenery, painting armies, game design, and of course actually playing the game, to finally make the Warhammer game of my dreams, and hopefully it'll do something for you too. I am, of course, talking about Dawn of War Warhammer, which, if you've been watching anything here on Zorpazorp lately, you'll be well familiar with. But today we have a totally unique hobby journey, so don't click away to doom scroll your feed. Follow me into the breach one last time. If you've been hiding from my latest hobby insanity, I recently launched a Dawn of War Warhammer campaign over on my second channel, Zorphammer, where we play a homebrew version of Warhammer 40k designed to mimic every delicious aspect of the greatest Warhammer video game of all time. We've already got 2 battle reports out, and here on Zorpazorp, you've seen me muster my Blood Ravens, Orcs, and build 2 fully custom sets of Dawn of War inspired scenery. All of that is linked down below in the Dawn of War Warhammer playlist, but today we're tackling the most important aspect of finally making Warhammer 40k everything I've always wanted it to be. Now, the first step on this journey was, of course, the rule set, adapting Warhammer 40k to create the feeling of playing the original RTS video game from 2004, while still feeling like a game of Warhammer. I won't bore you with any more game design details. If you want to see how that works, just go and watch one of the battle reports. But once we got a rough feel, I had to get cracking on the hobby side of the campaign, because as you may remember, Dawn of War has a very special feel for its scenery.
This gaming board needs to be absolutely massive.
Now let's face it, I'm kind of the king of stupidly large, unwieldy, oversized scenery here on YouTube. It's kind of my whole jam, but since moving to New Zealand, I haven't got to do a single super mega build yet, and Dawn of War Warhammer was the perfect time to give it a crack. But in typical Lockie fashion, I left myself about 3 days to actually get the board made. Now I will point out that the Dawn of War Warhammer rules don't require you to play a game this big, but for our first couple of games, I wanted to really capture the flavor of that exploration and conquest Dawn of War feeling. So I decided that my board would be 12 feet long and 6 feet wide.
So today we're gonna see some absolute speed mode scenery crafting, the type of building that means I can knock over a 72 square foot gaming board in basically 0 time. And to do that, we're gonna have to be smart.
The first choice is to pick a specific style of board that I can make fast. I'd recently knocked over 2 little arid woodland pieces that I'd really enjoyed, so for our first portion of the board, I'm gonna lean into a kind of desert arid vibe. I even decided that these little 2 woodland pieces would be perfect for one corner of the board as a nice little bit of detail and maybe a potential starting location for the Space Marine base in our first battle report.
A lot of the Dawn of War maps, which have like a mix of kind of woods and rocky cliffs and city and urban stuff. And I've also got this absolute horde of different kind of cities of death bits and pieces. Aquila Strongpoint, big buildings. Look at this guy. These are all on loan from my mate Andy Tucker. Andy, you're my savior, man. This is big. So we can do city stuff. We can do our orc terrain. We can do our Dawn of War stuff, but I don't know what to put underneath it. Let's have a look at what we've actually got here in all this stuff from Andy in some greater detail. So the big parts are lots and lots of gorgeous GW ruins. There's all these kind of newer ones. Look at this guy. Oh, he's huge. Semi-scratch built, semi-kit bashed piece. Look, you know what? I'm fried by indecision. Let's just throw this all out on the floor and see what we can come up with.
I laid out my foam sheeting to mark out our massive board and slapped my foresty marine base up in one corner, and then threw down some of my orc terrain to represent the 2 other faction starting locations for the first battle report. In this one, these would be 2 orc bases that the marine player would have to destroy. Then, of course, we need our special Dawn of War objectives, the strategic points, which are capturable locations that the players control to earn requisition.
Captured.
A resource key to the Dawn of War economy. Every year I have two insane periods here on the channel. Big project launches in May, June, and then November, December, and I just get absolutely smashed. 80-hour weeks, 18-hour days, it gets rough, and AG1 is a very handy option to help me keep it all together.
AG1 is a daily foundational nutrition supplement that supports whole body health with a science-driven formulation of vitamins, probiotics, and whole food sourced nutrients that aid your brain, gut, and immune system.
It's a perfect addition to my morning routine, great to swap out for that morning coffee and help me feel energized and improve my focus and concentration. A lot of my shoots end up being on the road, and when I'm traveling, my diet is pretty trash. Bo actually keeps a record of how many consecutive chicken burgers that I eat, but with the little AG1 travel packs, I can throw a few sachets in the suitcase and increase my intake of vitamins, minerals, and antioxidants, keeping the body nourished all day, every day.
Head to my link in the description below to get a free 1-year supply of AG vitamin D3 plus K2 and 5 AG1 travel packs with your first purchase of AG1.
Then I sorted through all of Andy's amazing scenery collection that he had loaned me to see if I could sort of inspire my hobby mojo.
So this is rapidly getting out of hand. I know it was all there in boxes, but there is so much scenery here now I've pulled it all out. The temptation to go stupidly massive is pretty bloody real.
I have way too much scenery for that 9x6 layout, so I threw down another 3 sheets of foam to take us to 12x6, and then I had a dope little idea to really convey the feeling of Dawn of War scenery. I could have a little series of biomes that sample some of the various environments that we see in maps in the game. I grabbed some foam sheets and then layered those up to mock up some of the elevated plateaus and rocky mountains. We of course already have our little woodland biome, and then this last quarter of the board could feature all of the GW Sector Imperialis terrain that doesn't have bases to become a really kind of concrete flavored city sector. Then all of the flat ground between the city walls and the mountains can be this desert wasteland covered in manufactorum equipment. With the plan made for the ultimate Dawn of War layout, it was time to bring it to life. I started with the woodland biome and modified one of the pieces to make the tiles have 2 modular layout options, with either the trees together in a clump or split apart just in case I need a bit more room for buildings. Then it was on to the mountain plateau biome. I grabbed a huge 6x3 sheet and marked it up with the shape of the plateau, including access ramps, and then cut the sheet into my modular tiles. Then I grabbed a monster sheet of polystyrene, 70mm thick. Now this is a beast and it was super expensive, so I'm not just gonna slap it down. I cut thick strips off the sheet and laid them down across my planned cliff face and marked up where I wanted the cliff to be, and then carved out the cliff face right up to where the first ramp would be. This was simply done by cutting chunks out of the foam and then texturing the surface with crinkled alfoil. I continue that process all the way around, but then to fill out the space behind the rock faces, I cut panels of really cheap and nasty white expanded polystyrene to give me that thickness and that height, before finishing off the final layer with another level of extruded poly to keep some nice strength at the surface of the board. I gave all the cliffs a final tweak carving and glued them down with foam-safe adhesive and wooden skewers, and then added a few little detail rocky protrusions to break up the flatness of the top of the escarpments, and then it is time for some ramps. The ramps are meant to look like kind of concrete installed structures, or maybe even stone that's been cut into the rock and then extended out, so they are super simple pieces of foam cut with a stone-like pattern that could kind of suit 40k or maybe even Middle Earth at a stretch as well. One ramp and then a sloped wall on either side, nicely textured and cut to size, with a few differences on each ramp to really make them mesh with their specific cliff. I grabbed some multi-purpose filler and smoothed out all of the gaps between the various layers, and then boom, our plateau just screams Dawn of War. I then decided to jump over to our third and most different biome, the city sector. First up, we need our city tiles. Now normally I would just deploy my massive modular cityscape that I've already built, but sadly it's all the way back in Australia. I haven't coasted it here to New Zealand yet, so I'm gonna have to carve a brand new city tile system to go underneath Andy's city's glorious buildings. I grabbed 3 sheets of foam and a strip of steel and got to work. I just completely winged this, giving each tile a consistent border so that they would match up nicely, and then just carved totally random tile patterns, sometimes larger, sometimes smaller. I'd put in little bits of trim or little borders around different tile sections. I've just carved them in with the knife, and then I widen each carving line to be a bit of grout amongst the tiles with a pencil, and then I come back with the knife and just hack the board apart to create craters and impact marks, which then get textured with alfoil. Painting was super simple, just prime it in dark grey, then spritz it with light grey with more rattle cans, just enough to give us like a blotchy concrete tone, and then accent the various tile grooves. This is all going to be super covered in rubble and buildings later on anyway.
It's time to work out how this joins into the city. Now, I want this sort of city sector terraced up and there to be a bit of a wall with more of these ramps. I'm loving these. Foam carve something simple, something classic, Dawn of War inspired, just like this stuff. And then we can just get all this down and get on with the rest of the build.
I grabbed a bunch more foam sheets and then, just like our ramps before, carved up some fortifications but with a few changes. 2 standard ramps, and the third would sort of come down sideways and with a nice little right hand turn and a bit of a plateau so that it all fits nicely next to the cliffs. Then I carved some chamfered bulwarks, which are sort of more like retaining walls than full-on defenses. I guess this is meant to be more of like a city sector boundary just above the Manufactorum plateau and not like a full-on fortified position. I carved in some battle damage and then slapped them all down, and they're coming together pretty nicely. I think it's working in theory, so I took them all outside and gave them the exact same concrete treatment as the sector tiles, and then while I had the rattle cans out, I also gave the cliffs and the ramps from the plateau a prime as well. To set the cliffs apart from the man-made stone or the concrete, they got like a stippled or overbrushed finish with some grey craft paint, and then I used that same technique to accent the craters and the battle damage all through the city tiles. Now it's time for the biggest step of them all, and oddly enough, this is actually going to be the fastest, and more importantly, it's going to transport these boards from looking barely started to pretty much 100% finished. I am of course talking about ground covering. Across this board, I used 2 base readies to start with, Geek Gaming Desert Sand and Stone and Fields of New Zealand. These are pretty close, so they blend really nicely. The Desert Sand has like a mix of sands and aggregates, but the Fields has some kind of foliage elements which are added in too, and that's going to be perfect for accenting all our cliffs, as well as tying this middle portion of the board to the color palette of our woodland biome from the beginning. The whole process is very simple. Just dump down a bunch of PVA, spread it around, and sprinkle the mixture everywhere. Once the flat areas were done, I came in with some Geek Gaming basing glue and ran a big thick seam of it up against the cliffs, and then just threw in some base ready. That'll kind of blend those cliffs nicely in. And then all around the cliffs, that's where I chose to use the Fields of New Zealand base ready to kind of build up that foliage and greenery that we'd naturally see closer to the rockery. To add even more green, I also hit that area with some foam flocks, a bit of green and greeny yellow, and that looked really nice as well. I let that dry all overnight and then came back the next day and absolutely soaked it in Geek Gaming Matte Scenic Sealant and then watered down PVA, and that just locked it down so tightly. Oh wow, though, it just took so long to dry in the cold New Zealand air.
If you want to play some Dawn of War Warhammer at home, we've got the experimental rules available for download on my Patreon. I am hoping that if this campaign is successful and I can keep making videos for it, to do a how to play guide and sort of go through all the rules right here on the channel. But if you want the rules right now, Patreon is the place to get them, and it's an amazing way to support Dawn of War Warhammer.
Or if you're getting excited and just buying a bunch of plastic crack for 40k, Middle-earth, or anything in between, make sure you use my affiliate links down below to get the best prices, and it sends me a little kickback to support Zorpazorp. Especially if you're thinking about grabbing the new epic Legions Imperialis, which I'm thinking at 6mm could be another great candidate for some Dawn of War action. Imagine how big the board could be at epic scale.
All right, guys, it is Thursday morning. We start filming in just under 48 hours, and the army is still not finished. I got distracted again making scenery. We need to haul ass. I have got some oil paints here, some burnt umber. These guys, you might remember from the last video, they're fully glossed varnished. They're ready to go. It's time for oils, weathering, transfers, and basing. Let's get these blood ravens ready to march to war.
I mixed up a brown oil wash and just smashed it down all over them to give me that gorgeous recessed detail, and then came back with a Q-tip soaked in neat oil thinner and pulled all the oils back off the highest points of the model to restore some of those highlights. I have a feeling I probably could have painted them a little brighter to begin with, because then I could have used a darker oil wash, which could have created a bit more of a grimy look, but they turned out pretty well anyway. Then to make them blood ravens, it is transfer time. Basically, my vibe with transfers is as many as possible everywhere. Just get all those cool details on there. Obviously, the blood ravens insignia, shoulder pads, and all over the place, but all of the little details, especially on the vehicles, really add a lot. Company badges, campaign markings, just get them looking as snazzy as possible. Then to finish, it's the classic Zorpazorp 40k basing recipe. Geek Gaming basing glue, grimdark city rubble mixed with city rubble for that perfect mid-tone grey, and then I lock it all down with isopropyl alcohol and matte scenic sealant, and now my armies are ready.
Alright, so it's been a couple of days now since we put down all of our base ready. Pretty much our boards are good. It's time to start slamming in a couple of extra tables and setting up the main board. I need to clean all of the junk, get curtains up, and get this studio ready to film our campaign. Pretty excited to see this start to come together, actually. Of course, there's all of this crap to pile on the boards once they're up. There is a lot to do.
As I started getting the studio ready, I just wanted to say a special thank you to my mate Andy Tucker, who really made this whole shoot possible, letting me steal his massive scenery collection for months on end. Thank you so much, mate. None of this would have been possible without you. And now with the tables ready, the real fun begins. First, down goes our woodland biome. Then the plateau, then a couple of sheets of foam to give us some height, and then our city biome. Then our final few desert boards for the manufactorum, and then with those down, the walls and the ramps for the city. And here we have our completed foundation, and now it is scatter terrain time. I threw in the marine base just to give us an idea on spacing. This is obviously going to be constructed during the battle by the Space Marine player. Then I threw in all of the Sector Imperialis style ruins for the city block. And then all the factory style ruins for the manufactorum. Then a sprinkle of scatter terrain. If you're looking to get some of the Dawn of War inspired STL files, I've got the lovely Space Marine and Orc buildings from Eons of Battle linked in the description, as well as some stunning Imperial Guard and Tau inspired scenery that I'm working on for the next round of battle reports from the guys at War Scenery, who've set up an affiliate link to support the project. So a big thank you to Louis from War Scenery, some amazing Dawn of War STLs down there in the description. And now it's time for a good night's sleep before the big day of filming tomorrow.
So today is the day. Bo will be here in, I think, about 5 hours to start filming this campaign. The board is in reasonable shape. There's little details that need to be added, and of course the orc terrain isn't in yet. All of the armies are ready to go, which is a good feeling, but I've just remembered a bunch of stuff that needs to be done. I've got our checkpoints, our critical locations. I've just brought them out here and given them a prime, so they still need to be painted. Still need to make the flags that stick into the critical locations. There's a lot to do. Let's get cracking.
The critical locations were a simple paint job, just some silver and brass through the airbrush to pick out the various components, and then a little red glow on the beacon lights that are all around the pieces, and then to tie it all together, I just slapped on an enamel wash. I plonked them down all over the board, and their location is pretty important. I want one within easy reach of each faction starting base, and then the other three are sort of equally reachable by all. Then, to get my super echoey garbage ready for filming, I hung up a big curtain across the middle of the room, jammed some soundproofing foam into the walls and my garage door, and then Bo and I were finally ready for filming. We knocked over the first mega narrative mission with 25 hours of filming over 3 days. It takes so much longer to actually play when you've got to roll cameras. And we christened the brand new alpha of the experimental Dawn of War Warhammer rule set. Battle reports are linked below, and the experimental rule set is available from my Patreon. And we were both unbelievably happy with how it went. As we add new factions, there's going to be a lot of challenges to balance the system and lots of rules tweaks as playtesting continues. At the moment, Space Marine, Orcs and Chaos are playable, with Eldar and Imperial Guard well on their way, but the core rules in the super rough first draft are just absolutely nailing what I intended. Warhammer 40k finally feels like Dawn of War. Dawn of War Warhammer is the Warhammer 40k that I have always wanted.